She is a professor at Oakland and Wayne State Universities in broadcasting. She joins us now in the Oakland County Megacast. Her name is Lena Antoon. Thank you for being with us today, Lena.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. How are you? How have you been during the pandemic?
You know what? I've been just fine. I adapted really quickly. So it was just a matter of transferring everything from being in person to basically being remote. And so that's nothing new. It's an ever changing lifestyle. And that's exactly what I've been doing, not with just myself, but with my students as well.
So, Lena, you teach broadcasting, and we've had other professors on that are in that teach in the broadcasting professions, and they've had their own struggles with this, and they've had their own pivots they've had to make. Broadcasting, in so many senses, is such a hands-on field and such a hands-on craft to master. How do you tailor that to being virtual when a lot of this is hands-on and learning with different pieces of equipment and different processes that usually goes on best in person in these labs?
Well, the first thing that I tell them is that change is ever consistent, and so is technology. So if you walk in as a freshman, learning one type of technology, learning one type of software, the difference is that it's going to change more than likely when you get out in college. Now, it has already changed in terms of just working remotely. Viewers and listeners, and I tell them this all the time, are seeing and hearing things regularly to them, but from behind the scenes, the new normal has changed. Like 75% of all of our work environment is now done remotely. So whether you're a producer from a creative standpoint, and that means just writing and producing, whether it's television or radio, it's all going to be done out of the courtesy of your own home. But if you have to go outside and you have to use the technology, which there is about 25% that actually do that, then what you do is you adapt to the scene, you adapt to the social distancing, you adapt to the technology. And a lot of the technology, even for myself, because I'm a radio announcer, I do everything out of the house. It was by the seat of my pants within a few hours. I literally had to go and buy a new laptop, and that's because my old laptop was not adaptable to the current software that we had at the business. And that's what I continue to tell my kids. You're going to constantly adapt. What you have to be willing to do is to change with that technology once it's given to you. Even interviews like we're doing right now is via Zoom. You can either social distance or you can Zoom. Whatever the case is, you can always adapt. And I try and give them that silver lining so that way they understand that this isn't necessarily permanent, but it's something to add into your arsenal, because what that does is it makes you more marketable once you get out into so and so, quote unquote, the real world.
Lena Antoon with us. She's a professor in broadcasting at both Oakland University and Wayne State University. And Lena, as you talk about adaptability, it used to be in the broadcasting profession that you were centered on one or maybe a few different things. If you were a producer, you were a producer. If you were a journalist and you were a reporter, you were a reporter. If you were a director, you were a director. Nowadays, you kind of have to be able, even before the pandemic, to do a little bit of everything in this industry, and that's even more the case now with the pandemic. How does that change how you teach your students and how you encourage them to be learners as they're emerging in this industry?
Well, what I don't want them to do, and I tell them this all the time, is do as I say, not as I do. And the reason why I say that is because when I started in this business, and I'm not going to give you how many decades ago, we were also focused on just learning one specific area. If I were to become a reporter, I just became a reporter. I didn't know the camera. I didn't know how to direct. I didn't know how to shoot. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do anything. Within about 10 years, the technology started to change. Not only did we start going virtual, but of course, we had to start putting on many hats. And so I tell my kids, or I tell my students, I should say, that learn other aspects, because what's going to happen is that particular job that you like, that you love, that you're passionate about may not be there in about 10 years. So what you're going to have to do is reinvent yourself. And so you might as well have as much of those tools as you possibly can. So learn the new software and adapt to it, which is exactly what I had to do. About 10 years ago, I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to edit film. I didn't know how to edit video. I didn't even know how to edit audio. And so I was forced to do so because of the job market that it was constantly adapting to. So I learned not only how to edit one software, but that taught me how to edit several different types of softwares. They're very similar in nature. So it's just a matter of, okay, what are you more what are you more likely to respond to? And that way you just go from that point forward. And it's the same with video cameras. It's the same with software when it comes to video editing as well. And it's just a matter of figuring it out. And even like social influencers and YouTubers and whatever the case is, they've already adapted. You've already got podcasters that have already adapted. The software and the equipment and the gear that's in audio is already there. It's just a matter of adaptability. You can take that stuff to your home. You can start working on it. You're given the tools by the professor, and you just continue to learn and adapt to it as the times continue to change. And that's exactly what I tell them to do.
So speaking of changing, the whole news world has changed as well. We're seeing a lot of newspapers fold up, and we are seeing other avenues bloom, really. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of influencers, and social media is changing the way we operate and how news gets out to the public. What advice are you giving to the young students about how the whole world of journalism is changing?
Just to be very consistent and be very positive and have an open mind to when it comes to adaptability and consistency. The good thing about the students is that they're natives to this, so they can easily pick up something, or they've already picked it up years before I've even taught anything to them, especially when it comes to YouTubers and podcasters. Podcasters came into effect, approximately 10 years ago, maybe even less than that. And so I can have a host, I can be here in Detroit, and my host can be in Arizona, and you would never be the wiser. And the same thing goes when it comes to producing and out on the field. It's just a matter of keep a positive attitude, and that the technology and the landscape is going to be changing. But the thing is that we're just now at least thinking in terms of the audience that this is just happening when it's been happening. Technology and adaptability has been going on. It's just a matter of, okay, let's just get up to speed and let's continue to move forward, because this pandemic shows us what our strengths can be, and what may not be necessarily our strengths, we can definitely build on. And that's what I tell the students to do. Being remote shouldn't be a negative. The only thing about it is the fact that we're not face to face, but that doesn't mean it's not going to change. That landscape isn't going to change in the next 6 months or whatever the case is, whatever that new normal is going to be. But right now, let's work with what we have right now, and let's move forward, and let's make it the best product, whether it's audio, whether it's video, whether it's podcasting, whether it's being a YouTuber, whatever the case may be. You just work with the tools that you have, and you continue to adapt and move forward, and have a positive hat, if you will, when you move forward with that.
So we know a lot of schools are still trying to finalize their back to school fall plans. Do you plan on being in the classroom? Are you comfortable with being in the classroom? And how will you address students who want to be completely remote?
So that's not necessarily a hard question. It's just a matter of working with the students. Right now, Wayne State's about to go for full virtual all over again. And I teach public speaking there. And so that's really a face-to-face, a particular medium. And that's kind of hard to do every once in a blue moon when it comes to doing it virtual. But I have done half of it on a hybrid level, which means that I will take a class of 32 students and we split them up, excuse me. And then what we do is 16 will come into a class on one day of the week, the other 16 will come into the class the second day of the week. And so we'll end up spacing them out. But right now, even that hybrids have turned virtual. So what I end up telling the kids is, by the way, what I want you to do is, for the most part, do your work as you were always going to do it. What I tend on doing is being more accountable for them, and not just that, but being there for them. So instead of having my lecture face to face with them, I'll take the tools that I have, whether it's a Zoom, whether it's a Google Hangout, or even whatever the tools that the university gives us, depending on what they have, whether it's a Blackboard, whether it's Canvas, they've got video conferencing. So instead of being in that classroom, we'll video everything in. And if not, then I will video conference myself and upload it. So that's one way, at least for me, to stay connected to them. So that way, at least they have a face-to-face. From that point forward, that's when I go to them and say, listen, we need to, at the very least, think about time management, because online work tends to make all of us, not all of us, but some of us slack off, especially with the incoming freshmen. Time management is a huge deal, especially if you're just left to your devices. So what I want them to do is, hey, reach out to me. I'll end up setting up meetings with them, whether it's Zoom or phone call, whatever the case is. So that way, at least we're in constant contact with one another. And I will still end up giving them the feedback that they need and that they deserve. So that way, when the landscape changes again, they've got the tools and they're able to do what they need to do, especially when it comes to public speaking, because it's such a different dynamic than using video production or television production or even radio production. Public speaking is very different. It should be done face to face, but given the circumstances, let's work with what we have, and let's make sure, at least from a time management standpoint, that we can do the work and we can be the best that we can be when we get into at least the next semester, because we're taking this semester by semester as opposed to just an entire full year.
So, Lena, I know you have a very diverse resume. And speaking of public speaking, you also do training for executives and people outside of just a classroom. What advice do you give them on having to give conferences or speak with employees through the internet or virtually versus in person?
Look at it from a face-to-face standpoint. You put your best foot forward, and granted, you're not going to necessarily see the faces, but work towards that and practice as much as you possibly can. Stand up, use your diction, use your hands, because that alone is another language and another delivery tool that you can have. So that way you can continue to engage with your audience. And that way, whatever message that you have when it comes to a meeting, when it comes to a Zoom call with 20 or 30 other people, at least they will stay not only like-minded, but they will at least stay engaged with you and at least listen to what you need to say. Because this virtual thing sometimes tends us to slack off. That means put on your best shirt, put on your best shoes, move forward, so that way, at the very least, you will feel good about the situation, and that way you can continue. And the good thing about virtual at the moment is that you can have your cue cards off to the side and know what you want to say. So that way, if you feel like you're going to flub, you're not going to. And if you do, pick yourself back up. It's the same exact thing. Do not worry about the situation. Just put a smile on your face and continue to do what you are meant to do, what you can do. So that way, you don't have to think of it as a virtual. Just use it right now. So that way, when you get out there with a bigger audience, you can be so much better than what you possibly can think of.
Lena Antoon with us. She's a professor of broadcasting at Oakland and Wayne State University, with us on the Oakland County Megacast on a family of TV and radio stations, including 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, West Bloomfield, Keego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, and 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills, a service of the Bloomfield Hills School District. So, Lena, we talked about earlier on how it's been how it can be difficult possibly for students to learn the hands-on nature of broadcasting without being in person, but there's so much opportunity to get the full scope of creating a broadcast when you are in a virtual setting and you have to have everything set on your end perfectly, whether it be lighting, whether it be the cameras, whether it be the audio, whatever the case may be. And there's opportunity there, I would presume, for presenting yourself and presenting your content still virtually to fulfill what you're learning in these classes.
Oh, absolutely. I thought it was really funny that I didn't think that a television studio would go basically dead and that everyone started doing everything out of their homes. But when it did, and that's what I look to when I see that, if you're doing a television production, you can use so much as your camera. You can use your laptop. You can order your lighting from Amazon, whatever the case is. You can have an entire studio built inside your bedroom for all you know. You just need possibly a little bit more aesthetically pleasing background than what you would have normally. And between that and then even the audio production is very, very cheap in terms of the software. And a lot of it for my students is free. And if not, then they can get something at a student rate, depending on what they like. So all I have to do is just give them the assignment and the tools and let them be creative in their own bedroom and go back and forth when it comes to what they need to, in terms of grading. But we've seen it happen on TV and even on radio. If I wake up at 5 a.m, I kind of roll out of bed when it comes to just doing my radio show or doing my traffic reports and doing my weather reports. But at the same exact time, I have the software that's capable that it sounds seamless. And that's another thing that I tell them is like, you have all of this equipment, you have all of this gear, you have all of these softwares, and you're natives to it. Use it to your advantage and start, working with it and making it look as good as you possibly want it to be, with the lighting, with the laptop, with your iPhone or whatever the case that you're using when it comes to your smartphone. So yeah, it can all be done. It's just at their fingertips, and I let them know that you guys are natives to it. Work with it. You're going to have the best time with it.
We tend to get creativity through people. They spark new thoughts, new ideas, new, just you feed off of other people. So when you can't have that in person, how do you encourage your students to foster that part of the creativity process?
I always give them my point of view, or I always give them, I should say, my own personal experience, because I can easily pick up a line here or there, listen to someone saying something off of a teleprompter or just giving their own words, and it sounds so much better, or at least I think it sounds better than what I would have said. So I constantly look to other people. If I can't be in the classroom, then I will look to the professionals and see what they're doing. Because typically speaking, that's exactly where I get my inspiration from, is from the professionals who I believe are better than I am, or at least, and I want to keep that mindset so that way it gives me the drive to be a better person, or at least a better broadcaster. Now, when it comes to listening to other people's work within your class, I'll end up uploading everything and saying, here's this and here's that. What can you take from there? And that's when those discussions kick in, those online discussions, if you will, from my students. When it came to public speaking, sometimes they think that they had it down, or that maybe they were missing some sort of an element. And what happens is I constantly upload different types of public speakers. And so I would send either local or international speakers, and I would upload them into our Canvas or whatever the software that the school has. And I said, what can you take away from that, and tell me what is it that maybe that inspires you to at least learn from that. And then they'll give me the examples. And when that happens, then they actually start to move forward and they think about it. And the same thing goes when it comes to audio and when it comes to visuals. They will look at other people's work. I will give them other people's work, or I will have them look out and take other assignments and do other people's work, so that way it inspires them to maybe get that creative spark going, so that way they can do not only just better assignments, but they can actually take that with them and further out of the classroom and years to come, hopefully.
Lena Antoon with us, professor of broadcasting at Oakland and Wayne State University, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Lena, just another couple minutes with you. Any lasting advice as we're approaching the fall semester for students that are coming back to continue their broadcasting education, or for those who are coming in as they're approaching this unique new way of learning?
Just think of it as a different landscape, and that the good news is that you're young, and that not only what you learn now can be a little bit different, by the time you graduate. So just take the tools that you're going through right now and just adapt to it, because again, that landscape is going to change come January, come next September, whatever the case is. And so I always tell them, especially in this world of broadcasting and technology, or whatever the case is, whatever you want to go to, always remember that everything is like change is consistent. And that old adage, I take it not only with me, but I tell that to the students, is that change is always consistent. And not just that, but be open to other ideas, be open to other avenues, be open to other professions. But also take what you get from not just my classroom, but all the other classrooms that you go to, whether it's virtual, whether it's hybrid, whether it's face-to-face. Take those tools and use them and adapt them to your next profession, because there's going to be, in this broadcasting world, you will play many hats. I started out one way. I'm already on my third career, let's just say, on my third career link. So that's what I tell them to do, is that change is consistent, and that you have to be open to adaptability. And with them being natives to technology, it just opens up a whole new world for them, and they should just marinate on that and then just move forward, because it's going to change, and they're going to pick up where the other person left off, if not more.
Well, Lena, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Lena Antoon, professor of broadcasting at Oakland and Wayne State University, with us on the Oakland County Megacast.